Yeah, because this we've already addressed standing out and how that triggers dopamine and being a purple cow. But I want to revisit again with the trust. We need to find some way in our interactions to stand out. The context we talked about before was on our LinkedIn profile. So a catchy title, something like that. Now expanded even further with your interactions at events or interviews. Try to find something that's still professional, but makes you stand out to get a dopamine response in their mind. And you can decide what you're comfortable with and what works. A couple of examples. I knew one guy that would wear a tie, but instead of folding it through the loop at the end, he just flopped it over the top. And I think it's because he didn't want to have wrinkles in his tie, or his OCD or something, I don't know. But it was something that made him memorable and made people talk about him. I'm talking about him now. It worked. It was just something that made him stick out in my mind. And when I was sitting in those rooms talking to all the intern candidates after intern candidates, that's what I would try to tell them, is that you have to find something in your career or your background to differentiate. Because otherwise, I'm asking you questions and they're saying, oh, I took this class and I took this class and I did this group project. Well, so did the last 3 or 4 people I talked to, and the ones coming after you are going to be exactly the same. What is it about your background that is different? Did you do some side project for a buddy that involved some data analytics? Did you do something besides just the bare minimum so that you stand out? There's going to be another element to this that we'll talk about with timing of interviews and trying to find jobs where we can impact this as too. But that's what I want you to start thinking about. It's a professional way to differentiate yourself. And that's the next hack, is to do something different. I heard about one person for a business card. They gave out suckers that said, we teach people how not to suck. Once again, I'm talking about it. It triggered some dopamine, and that got people talking. It's almost like that old adage that any publicity is good publicity. Asterisk, still a professional industry, and you don't want to go too far with it. But find something that's catchy. I actually did this with the body language training. I was in an IT field, found this other thing that was completely not related at all to IT or data, but it became a differentiator. And I was able to start presenting at tech conferences on that topic. And just that alone started making people notice me more and had a halo effect with their perceptions of my abilities, because I think they see me as a lot more competent than I actually am. Okay. Hack number 6.
Let's do the video. I want to show this video. It kind of talks about the shortest distance between 2 people being a story, and how you can connect on a story level, and why that's important. Oh, is it not?
Oh, I got to go to it. I thought I had it embedded.
Oh, you know what? That's okay. I'll just tell a story. Okay. This picture it's a really sweet story about a man who, his son is dying of cancer, and he doesn't want to tell his son that he's actually dying. But it's a beautiful story. You can look it up. On a personal note, I think I'll share a different story. It was a nice May day, and my sister had always wanted to learn how to ride a motorcycle, and at the time I had 8. So she came over, we hung out. It was a nice day. I decided to go motorcycle ride in our little neighborhood. It was just me and her, and we went through the neighborhood, and then I decided, hey, let's go over here where we can do some turns and learn how to do a little bit different way of riding a motorcycle, because it takes a while to learn. On that turn to move to where I thought we would go, my sister lost control, and on a little 50cc without a helmet, hit a backhoe going about 30 miles an hour head first. This was a very traumatic moment in my life, because I didn't know what was going to happen, how things were going to play out. I was able to call 911. The ambulance came, took her to Utah Valley Regional Medical Center, where they looked at her for just a moment and life-flighted her up to Primary Children's, where she spent 10 days in a medically induced coma and 7 weeks in the neuro ICU. I'm proud to say, I'm very happy to say that my sister did survive. She has a traumatic brain injury, also known as a TBI, but she physically functions fairly well for somebody who was very, very close to death. Well, why do I share that story? Well, being vulnerable and in a moment of showing vulnerability triggers something in the brain that I just changed your chemical reaction in your brain just by sharing a little vulnerable piece of my story with you, and how impactful that can be. I was recently at a conference where I was with a lot of C-level executives, like big wig executives, and we're sitting at a table and we have 2 minutes to introduce ourselves, and we have a story that we're supposed to tell, and the story is tell a memorable medical experience that you've had. Well, in my life, I don't have a lot of medical experiences, and so my sister's accident is always the first one that pops to mind. And so I shared this story and struggled not to get a little teary-eyed in a couple of the moments, because I talked about how amazing and how grateful I am to the first responders of that accident that day. We actually still have a great relationship with the police and EMTs that were there, as well as the fire department. I think every year on my sister's accident anniversary, she goes and visits the fire department and police department. She's kind of a prodigy there now. But I shared this story, and it was kind of intimidating because I was sharing this story and becoming vulnerable with these C-suite executives that are much higher level than I am. And I got to the end of my story. I said how grateful I was to the first responders and the amazing impact they had on my life and my family's life. And instead of being, I don't know what I thought that the executives would do, but their response was different than I expected. They were like, what can we do to help you? Either in business, it had nothing to do with the story, but because I got on that vulnerable level, they wanted to help my business and take it to the next level, just because I put myself out there in a way that they admired. It's something that a lot of C-suite people don't know how to do because they feel this professional pressure all the time. So they actually looked up to me being vulnerable in that moment and putting myself out there. So it is actually important to tell vulnerable stories. Maybe not ones where you might cry, but there's actually interesting research out there that in a job interview, there were candidates that were asked about their marijuana usage. And it was interesting in that study that the people who were honest about their marijuana usage, saying that they had tried or dabbled or used it in the past or was ever curious about it, whatever their history with it was, were found to be more hireable and more employable than those who said, oh no, I've never touched the stuff. Because we all are real. We have real emotions. Some are raw emotions. And when we show those and we share those, it connects on a level and changes the chemistry in our brain to enhance that competence and trust cycle a lot faster than if we were trying to tell facts. I have a saying that says, facts tell, stories sell. So when you're sharing stories, you connect with people in that part of the brain that makes them want to help you more. So the shortest distance between two people is a story. If you can find some story that you can relate with them on, it's always a benefit. And triggering emotion. It, like I said, doesn't have to be a sad story. It can be a fun, happy story, time that you succeeded and beat all odds and crossed that finish line. And, people can relate to that. They relate to it, they empathize with it, they love it. So, hack number 7 is facts tell, stories sell. tell your story, get vulnerable, have emotion, and connect that way.